In Philippines, the son of the late dictator, Ferdinand Marcos, is about to be sworn in as the president. Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos Jr. won last month's elections by a landslide victory. It is a stunning comeback for Marcos dynasty since Ferdinand Marcos was ousted by a popular revolt in the year 1986. Later today, Marcos Jr. will take the oath in a public ceremony at the National Museum in Manila. Hundreds of local and foreign dignitaries will be part of the ceremony for the inauguration. More than 15,000 police, soldiers and Coast Guard personnel have also been deployed across the capital. Philippines' economy is already ravaged by COVID-19. Moreover, rising prices are squeezing it further. In a country of 110 million people, nearly a quarter lives on less than $2 per day. Marcos Jr. has made tackling inflation, boosting growth and ramping up food production his priorities. Voters are counting on the new president to deliver on pledges to create jobs and bringing down consumer prices as well. He has also appointed himself as the Agricultural Secretary to lead the overhaul of the plagued sector. Not only this, he has also pledged to defend the country's rights to the disputed South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost entirely. However, he has offered very little detail on how he will achieve all these goals. 64-year-old Marcos Jr. succeeds the hugely popular Rodrigo Duterte. Duterte pivoted away from the United States towards China, but Marcos Jr. has indicated that he will pursue a more balanced relationship with the two superpowers. Marcos Jr. last month said that he would adopt a friends to all, enemy to none foreign policy. While he has backed Duterte's drug war, he is not likely to enforce it aggressively. The swearing in comes days after a last-ditch bid by activists to thwart Marcos. The Supreme Court dismissed final attempts to have Marcos Jr. disqualified from the election and prevent him from taking office. Hundreds of activists are expected to protest against the inauguration. And for more on this, we are being joined by journalist Dave Grunebaum from the National Museum in Manila, where the oath-taking ceremony will be taking place in just a few hours from now. Welcome to the broadcast, Dave.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm actually in Quezon City, which is in Metro Manila, and I'm at one of the protest sites, and the protest is underway now. You can probably see some of the camera crews who are shooting it. Just on the other side of this camera crews is an artistic dance that's going on. Now, this site has particular importance and particularly significance to survivors of the torture during the Marcos dictatorship. He ruled from the mid-60s to the mid-80s, almost half of it under martial law. Thousands of people were tortured, killed, disappeared. There's a memorial wall just on the other side of that crowd that has the names of hundreds of people who were victims during the martial law era. And today, Marcos, who will take his oath of office as president, Marcos Jr., just a couple hours from now, well, today, coming up in just a few minutes, survivors of that torture, they're taking an oath to pledge that they will fight to keep the true history of what happened back then alive. The reason why that's so important is because one of the reasons why Marcos Jr. won the election is a massive social media disinformation campaign that whitewashed his father's record.
Right, like you mentioned, the security in the capital has been beefed up ahead of the inauguration, especially with protests being planned. We're right now at the site where protests are taking place. Can you take us through the security arrangements ahead of the inauguration ceremony today?
Yeah, well, security very tight. Obviously, at the museum area, they're limiting the crowd size there. One, it can only accommodate so many, and two, they want to keep security very tight. Obviously, you have a new head of state coming in. They've got people patrolling in the rivers. They've got police all over. They did set aside different areas of the metro area where people can protest. They've said, though, if any of those people try to protest anywhere else, they will be stopped immediately. There's a huge security presence, obviously, with this. In the area at the National Museum, people have already had to gather there to make sure that they are in place so that everything is very, very tight. You talked a little bit earlier about some of the things that Marcos Jr. Is going to try to do. Obviously, there's high hopes for him. He won the election with almost 59% of the vote, winning an outright majority, by far a huge victory. But now the pressure is on for him to deliver. a quarter of this country living on less than $2 a day income. Inflation right now, fuel prices rising, food prices rising. People really concerned about what he's going to do about this. The education sector, they have not resumed back to school classes yet in this country. So many other countries have, they have not done that yet. So the pressure is on. Interesting point, one of his campaign promises was that he would bring the price of rice down to 20 pesos per kilo. If you put that in USD, that's about 37 cents per kilo, an incredibly low price. Most analysts have said it would be impossible for him to do that, or at least to do that and keep it there for long. For him to do that, can he really deliver on all these promises? Well, we'll see.
Right, you just mentioned the challenges that he faces as the 17th president of Philippines. While it's a new dawn in the country, apart from the protests, how's the mood like in the capital? Take us through the events that are lined up for the day.
Yeah, well, obviously, for those that are pro-Marcos, and again, almost 59% of the people did vote for him. Again, they've got high expectations that he is going to deliver. Today, you have got ceremonies that are going underway, saying goodbye to outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte, welcoming the new president who will take his oath of office in less than 3 hours. He will be taking his oath of office. Then he'll give an inaugural speech. There's going to be huge eyes on that. What does he say? Marcos Jr. said he wants to keep the ceremony solemn, rather traditional ceremony. But what are the specific things that he's going to say in that speech? Of course, he's going to try to have a positive, upbeat mood. But what are the specific things he's going to highlight? People are trying to really hone in on that. Because as you said earlier, he really didn't give any specifics about how he's going to govern. When he was talking about during the campaign, he was very vague. He didn't take part in any debates. He only did interviews with favored media who would ask him softball questions. So there's really going to be keen eyes on what does he say in that inaugural speech, and does he give any specifics at all or not?
Thanks for getting us up to speed on this. That was Dave Grunebaum live from Manila. Thanks very much.